The night was one of those unsettlingly quiet ones, where the silence seemed to cling to the air like fog. I remember sitting in my room with nothing but a dim lamp lighting the desk. Outside, the world felt asleep, but there was a strange heaviness that wouldn't let me rest. As I scrolled through old files on my computer, I found myself replaying the collection of true scary stories I had come across over the years, stories that had lingered in my mind like shadows that refused to fade. Tonight, I want to share them with you. Each one carved itself into my memory not because of gore or blood, but because of the chilling realism that made my spine shiver. These weren't tales of monsters or vampires. They were moments where the line between the normal and the horrifying blurred in ways I can never forget. The first story comes from a woman who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. She had always been the type who double-checked her doors at night, locked her windows, and kept the porch light glowing until morning. Yet one night, as she lay in bed, her phone lit up with a notification from her security camera. It was nearly 2:30 a.m., and her front door camera had detected movement. With trembling fingers, she opened the app and froze when she saw the live footage. A man was standing at her door, not moving, not knocking, not ringing the bell. He simply stood there, staring directly into the camera lens as though he knew she was watching. His eyes didn't blink, his lips curled into the faintest smile, and he held something in his hand, something shiny, metallic. She wanted to call the police, but as she picked up the phone, she realized the man was no longer on the screen. The porch was empty. And then there was a knock. A slow, deliberate knock at the door that made her blood run cold. She didn't open it. Hours later, when the morning sun finally rose, she found scratches on her doorframe, deep enough to be carved by a knife. She never saw him again, but every night since, she swears she still hears that knock in her dreams. Another tale belongs to a man who worked the night shift at a gas station on a lonely stretch of highway. He described how the nights could stretch endlessly, with only the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the occasional car pulling in for fuel to keep him company. One night, around 3 a.m., a car stopped at the farthest pump. The driver didn't get out. The man waited, staring through the glass door, expecting to see someone approach. But no one did. Finally, curiosity and unease pushed him outside. The car was still running, the driver's door wide open. When he looked inside, the seat was empty. The engine purred, the headlights cut into the darkness, but there was no one in the car. He went back inside, trying to shake the feeling of dread. But when he turned to glance at the monitor that displayed the security cameras, he froze. On the screen, standing right behind the counter where he had been only seconds ago, was a figure in black, tall, faceless, unmoving. He turned instantly, but the store was empty. The car outside had vanished as well. He quit his job a week later. One of the most chilling stories I ever came across was from a girl who had just moved into a new apartment. It was small, affordable, and in an old building downtown. The place had character, creaky wooden floors, and high ceilings that made her feel like she had stepped back in time. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine, but then strange things began to happen. At night, she would hear footsteps above her, heavy and slow, pacing back and forth. But the landlord had told her she was on the top floor. There was no one above her. She brushed it off until one night, she woke to the sound of whispering. The whispers seemed to seep through the ceiling, low and urgent, as though someone was having a frantic conversation. She pressed her ear to the wall, but the moment she did, the voices stopped. Then came the knocking. Soft, rhythmic knocks on the wall right beside her bed, knocks that seemed to follow her as she moved the bed to different sides of the room. One evening, she decided to investigate the attic space above her apartment. With a flashlight in hand, she climbed the narrow stairwell and pushed open the creaky door. The beam of her light fell on something that made her stomach turn. The floor was covered in hundreds of scratch marks, as though someone or something had been trapped there, trying desperately to claw their way out. She moved out the very next day. Another true account comes from a delivery driver who often worked late shifts, dropping packages off in neighborhoods where most people were already asleep. One night, he had a delivery to an old farmhouse that sat isolated at the edge of town. The place looked abandoned, with broken shutters and weeds crawling up the walls, but the order was confirmed for that address. When he pulled up, the house was dark, but the front porch light flickered faintly. He climbed the steps, placed the package down, and knocked, more out of habit than necessity. That's when he heard it, the sound of footsteps rushing toward the door from inside. Startled, he stepped back, expecting someone to swing it open. But no one did. Instead, the footsteps stopped right at the door. For a long, eerie moment, silence pressed down on him. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. The driver didn't wait to see what was on the other side. He bolted to his truck, peeled out of the driveway, and never returned. A week later, he heard from a coworker that the farmhouse had been abandoned for nearly 30 years. No one had lived there. No one had ordered a package. Perhaps the most terrifying of these stories is one I can never shake. A college student, living alone in a small studio apartment, began noticing little things out of place. A glass that wasn't where she had left it, clothes on the floor she didn't remember dropping. At first, she blamed it on stress, lack of sleep, or forgetfulness. But then she started waking up to the faint smell of cigarettes, even though she didn't smoke. She decided to set up a camera while she slept, just to ease her mind. The next morning, she checked the footage, and what she saw shattered her sense of safety forever. Around 2 a.m., a man crawled out from under her bed. He stood there for several minutes, watching her as she slept, then walked to the kitchen, drank from her water bottle, and sat on her couch before disappearing back under the bed. She called the police immediately, and when they arrived, they found a homeless man still hiding beneath her mattress. He had been living there for weeks without her knowing. And there are countless more stories of people hearing voices in baby monitors when no one else is home, seeing strangers staring from the edge of forests, receiving phone calls from numbers that don't exist. Each one a reminder that reality is often far scarier than anything our imagination can create. What chills me most is not the possibility of ghosts or monsters, but the thought that the people we pass by every day, the strangers who cross our paths, may hold secrets darker than we could ever imagine. Sometimes the scariest stories are not about the supernatural at all, but about the real human capacity for darkness. As I sit here, recounting these tales, I feel that same weight in the air, the one I mentioned at the beginning of this night. A heaviness that makes me check the corners of the room, glance at the locked door, and wonder if someone, somewhere, is watching. Perhaps tonight, as you listen, you too will find yourself double-checking the locks, glancing over your shoulder, or staring just a little too long at the shadows in your room. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are not just stories. Sometimes they are warnings.